next up we've got Dee. She's come over from the coast, and Dee is a naturopath, a massage therapist, body worker, yoga teacher, and is certified in patient-assisted therapy. And sustainable health and the treatment of disease is very much holistic. And it's not merely enough to treat symptoms, but to delve deep into the understanding of an individual's environment, their lifestyle, and their mental and spiritual health. And so specifically in this session, Dee's going to take us through both macro and micro dosing of psilocybin. So thanks so much, Dee, for coming on over, and I'll pass on the microphone to you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Dee. I'm really honoured to be here in Lyndon. Some of my earliest psychedelic experiences were done here in the 90s. Now, I'm just really aware that people have been sitting for quite a while, so the invitation is only if you'd like to, if you want to stand up and just move your body around. Give yourself a shake. We absorb information better when our bodies are awake. Shake it out. Shake it up. Shake it up. Awesome. So I am a naturopath, so I come from this from a plant medicine perspective.
Dee's talk is just is for about 45 minutes, 30 minutes with questions and answers, and after that we will have an extended lunch break. So I encourage you to stay here and wait for the extended lunch break.
Thank you, Louise. So plant medicine is often referred to as the alternative medicine. It is the original medicine. In particular, plants have been used since before recorded history, and the psilocybin mushroom has been used by indigenous cultures long before any records were kept. Now, these slides are mostly just for me to stay on top of. So psilocybin is the active constituent in the species Psilocybin cubensis mushroom. It's naturally occurring in 200 species. Depending on where you reference, there's 20 to 30 of these species native to Australia. These medicines are classed as psychedelic, meaning soul or mind, and deleterious meaning manifest. So mind manifestation when you take these fantastic fungi. A little brief history of psilocybin. Like I said, it's been used since pre-recorded history in indigenous cultures throughout the world. In more recent history, it was Scheduled 9 as a prohibited substance, and as Steve mentioned, the possession, sale, distribution of this medicine is illegal. Just before we go on, if people feel comfortable, I'd really like to get an idea of who's used psilocybin in this room. Only if you feel comfortable. Raise your hand. Yeah. Look at all those psychonauts. Now keep your hand up if you have used it in a therapeutic way. Awesome. Mostly macro? Micro? Fantastic. So recently in 2023, the Therapeutics Good Act in Australia could not deny the therapeutic use of 2 substances that were listed as having no medical benefit. So they changed the scheduling from Schedule 9 to Schedule 8, which means it's still a prohibited substance, but it can be used in clinical trials, but it can also be used by authorised prescribers. As we've mentioned, those authorised prescribers are going to be psychiatrists. So psilocybin is a major breakthroughs for treatment of medical-resistant depression, mostly meaning that medical-resistant depression is people who have tried 2 or more medications. Some people try electric shock therapy and they still have no relief of their symptoms. Psilocybin, I haven't got my slide up here, but the molecular structure of psilocybin is incredibly similar to serotonin, which is our neurotransmitter, which is responsible for mood regulation. Mechanism of action, oh, here she is. When we ingest psilocybin, it is turned into a compound called psilocybin, and this acts at the 5-HT2A receptor. So psilocybin mimics our own serotonin. It's almost like this fantastic fungi was made for us, made to use to modulate mood and enhance our well-being and our consciousness. So this is probably one of my favourite slides. Why the high? So those 5-HT2A receptors are really prominent in our the outer cortex of our brain. So here you can see an image. The first image here is your brain in a normal waking state under a MRI, and the second image is your brain on psilocybin, which is pretty impressive, right? And this is why they can't deny the science any longer. Like the trials, the research, it's in. They cannot hide it any longer. So what happens when we take psilocybin in a macro dose? We have parts of our brain that we don't normally use are really activated. And parts of our brains that haven't had connectivity before really start speaking to each other. Okay. Macrodosing and microdosing is what I'm going to be talking about today. So, my area of expertise, well, not expertise, my area of training is in macrodosing. I was lucky enough to complete a course in psychedelic-assisted therapies through Mind Medicine Australia. And we really focused on the macrodosing model. So how is this process affecting our mind and our consciousness? So this is the big question, right? Our mind is, as described by Dan Siegel, an embodied and relational process, self-organising, emergent process that regulates the flow of energy and information. So basically, we have our brain, which is what the psilocybin is activating in that 5-HTA receptor, and then we have our mind, which essentially is on a continual feedback loop to our environment, the world around us. And what happens is, as we go through life, we create this organisation of mind from our experiences, from our life, and what we become we have a view of the world, the way in which we see the world, and with people that suffer from medical-resistant depression or anxiety, they tend to get stuck in what we call the default mode network. The default mode network is a collection of cells, a collection of brain parts that are really active during when we're not task-focused. So with people that have depression, that default mode network is either really active or really deactivated. And what the psilocybin does is it comes in, like we saw in the slide there, and it completely deorganises your brain. And the interesting thing is, as a health professional, you know, we are always wanting to move towards homeostasis for well-being. But with the psilocybin, we actually want to move away from homeostasis. We become so set in the way that we think, in the way that we see the world, that it's really difficult to change behaviour. And the most exciting thing about psilocybin in a macro dose, in a therapeutic setting, is that it can change the way that we've organised our mind and the way that we look at the world. Okay. You probably, with everybody here, you probably know the effects of what can happen under psilocybin. Those 5,2-HA receptors that I talked about, they're very prominent in the visual cortex, and why you're getting hallucinations. Also in the higher parts of your brain that are responsible for perception, organisation. Some negative effects. I don't know if anybody's experienced any negative effects here from psilocybin, but these are some of the negative effects from a macro dose. Cautions and contraindications. Antidepressants, SSRIs, because they work on the same serotonergic pathway. So anyone that is looking at doing, I was lucky enough to be in part of a trial in Melbourne, a healthy persons trial for MDMA and psilocybin. I chose the MDMA only because the psilocybin was synthetic. So I went through some really rigorous testing, like I had a full complete medical, an EEG, they took bloods and urine to make sure that there was no other drugs in my system. There wasn't, unbelievably. So these are some of the things that you really, you really want to be cautionary. Psychosis, mania, family history. Psilocybin really increases your heart rate, so cardiovascular disease. Okay, this is a non-medical macro dose, which is in grams, because that's how the layperson works, in grams. The medical dosage is all in micrograms. And of course the potency will vary across different mushrooms and different species, and also where it's grown, you know, because that energy from the earth where it's grown, or whether it's grown inside or outside. Okay, here are the macro dosings of clinical trials. As you can see, it's all in micrograms, but you just convert that into grams, but it is quite low. And with a lot of these trials, I know with the trial I did, it was 25, a friend of mine did the psilocybin, it was 25 micrograms, which is quite a low dose. And a lot what's going on in the trials is, it's not about efficacy, it's about safety. So they want to prove it's safe, so they're giving you a smaller dose than perhaps you and I would do. Yes. Well, that's funny that you say that, because a friend of mine did the psilocybin and 25 micrograms, and she said it wasn't enough of a dose. It actually made her really anxious because it wasn't a micro and it wasn't a macro. So she was just kind of stuck in this weird space for, 5 hours. So I'm just going to quickly talk through this because so listen, the macro dosing in a therapeutic session, like I said, this is how I was trained. So there is a lot of screening, there's a lot of psychological screening, medical screening. Now I've got to think if I can remember the question. Is it 25 micrograms of psilocybin or 25 micrograms of psilocybin?
Yeah, like is it the actual dried mushroom?
No, it's made in a lab.
And is it the extracted compound?
It's the extracted compound and synthesised in a lab. That's why I went for the MDMA, the 90.9% medical grade MDMA. But having said that, it wasn't enough of a dose. So I'm going to quickly go through this just because I'm really conscious of the time. So I was trained in, I think it's the MAPS protocol for macro dosing, which I think which was modelled on Stanilov's Groff, the famous, Rick Donlan from MAPS, and lost my train of thought there. Oh yes, so Stanislav Grof developed this way of once psychedelics were prohibited, he developed a breath technique which you can actually access altered states through breath. So this is very modelled on that. So there's a 3-phase process. There is the preparation stage where we do some psychotherapy, we talk about what's going to happen in the dosing session. We also talk about longitudinal factors, family history, childhood trauma, sexual abuse, anything that may come up in the dosing session. Creating that trust and rapport is a huge big thing. Like, the preparation really doesn't want to be rushed. The more safety and the more trust that you have, the better off the dosing session is going to be. And phase 2 is, of course, the dosing. I've gone on to that. Oh, no, here we go. That's all right. The dosing session, which can last anywhere from 3 to 6 hours, depending on how sensitive you are to the medicine. And
Sorry, I can't.
you can't.
You can't. You have to.
No, oh, that's okay. The dosing session. So it can last anywhere up to 3 to 6 hours. It can be quite an intense experience. It can be quite scary for some people. The therapist or the dyad, usually in the medical model there's two. There's usually 2 therapists there. But creating safety, presence, curiosity rather than fear, because sometimes some imagery can come up that is quite confronting. People can have memories come up that they didn't know that they had. So really, the role of the therapist here is creating a really safe space and allowing the person to really embody the experience, to stay in it. The person is lying down. The person has a very curated playlist that is really designed for them to go on a journey. And let me tell you, it is a journey. And they're also wearing eye masks. So the big difference between taking psychedelics in a recreational setting is often you're interacting with the world around you. You might be dancing, you might be seeing a band, you might be seeing fractals. In this therapeutic model, you are lying down. And I wouldn't say it's sensory deprivation, but you are going deep within. There are no distractions, there are no lights, you've got your music, so it's very much an internal journey. It's very much a journey into your own psyche. And I like to say to people, you know, your psyche's not going to present to you anything that you cannot handle. Because sometimes it can be, I don't know, has anyone here had some difficult experiences with their macro dosing? Wow. No one. I love it. Yeah, well, nausea's a thing. Purging's a thing. Yeah. That's okay. I'll be happy to answer it later. This is probably the most underestimated phase of the work, is the integration. I know there's a lot of people doing the work and there's not a big emphasis on integration. So what's happened is we've been taken out of our natural state of consciousness. Our brain has had this massively novel experience, and a lot of people who've never had experience with psychedelic medicines before don't know how to process it. There's, you know, the biggest thing I hear is, I do not have the words to describe my experience. It was so profound. So with the integration, what we do is we work with the client and we work through whatever it is that has come up in the dosing session, but we also try to stay away from going into the narrative of the experience and staying with the experience itself. So often, you know, I talked about the mind. You know, our mind likes to organise everything or put meaning to something. And in these experiences with these substances, oftentimes there is no meaning. It's about an embodied experience. It's about really staying present, really staying with it, and experiencing it in its totality, whatever comes up. Oh, that's my stage 3. Okay. Sorry, I'm happy to answer questions at the end. I just kind of sped through that macro. So the micro dosing, people have micro dosed before. Not so much an area of my expertise. I'm more into the macro. But once Louise asked me to speak here today, I went on a little microdose protocol for my perimenopausal symptoms. But of course, forgetfulness is one of the symptoms of perimenopause, so forgetting to take it was an issue as well. But what I did notice was, yes, my mood was enhanced. I was more patient, my brain fog was a bit better. But it's really dose dependent, and I think the first time I did it, I was a bit overzealous, and I was having visual distortions when I was in the gym, which was probably, I'm always, yeah, a little bit more. I had access to some fantastic giants in the industry, and one of them was Dr. James Fadiman, who's been working in this, he must be 80-something, for a very, very long time, and he's been a real pioneer of the microdosing, and I really like his protocol, but there's lots of other protocols out there. So ostensibly a microdose is consuming a very small portion of a macro. A lot of people, a lot of professionals debate what constitutes a microdose. Dr. Fadiman says anywhere from 10 to 20%. I tried the 20%, it was way too much. Stick to the 10%. I mean, there are coaches available to help you with this sort of thing, which I would highly recommend. So the idea of the micro is that, here's some benefits. Heightened focus, creativity, productivity and energy, decreased anxiety, decreased depression or stress, less social anxiety, reduced menstrual pain, emotional openness, increased spiritual awareness, reduced cravings for addictive substances. There's not a great deal of research in the microdosing space, mostly because the research is all double-blind placebo. So, you know, when you're doing research on macro, it's pretty obvious in the sample population who gets the macro. But our mind is such a powerful thing. With the microdosing, one cohort will get the microdose and one cohort will get the placebo. And our mind's so powerful that the placebo was working, so they really couldn't differentiate. But I mean, Fadiman has a website and he has collected thousands and thousands of people's experiences with microdosing. And some of them are really, really unbelievable, especially, you know, with the macro and the antidepressant. Someone who's been suffering from medical resistant depression for a long time, people often use the microdosing to help them wean off their SSRIs. But they're using it on all sorts of things, you know, autism, ADHD, menopause. Okay, so this is Dr. Fadiman's protocol. Don't do what I did. Take the first dose when you have a very low demand day. So, because we don't know what it's going to do, you know, you don't know what it's going to do to you. It's there's so many factors that can constitute hypersensitivity to this medicine. So I'm going to go with 25 micrograms, 2.5 grams. 10% of that is 0.25. So day 1, take your microdose. Day 2 and 3, no dose. Day 4, microdose. Day 5 and 6, no dose, and then back to your dosing day. The reason I really like this protocol is you can actually build up a tolerance to psilocybin. So Fadiman recommends, you know, do it up to 4 to 10 weeks, but definitely take a break. Also journaling and writing down your experiences, any change, any subtle change in moods, anything that you notice. It's good to keep a log or a diary of that. So this is my last slide, so this is, I just wanted to mention when we did do the lecture with Dr. Fadiman, someone asked a fantastic question that I'd love to share, is, you know, with the macro dosing, that's where you have that complete disorganisation of brain and the way to enact neuroplasticity and create those new pathways and those changes in behaviour. And someone asked him, they said, oh, you know, it sounds like with the microdosing, you're just treating the symptoms. But with the macrodosing, you're treating the actual issue, which I thought was really apt. And he did quite agree to it. And he, you know, like I said, a lot of people use the microdosing to wean them off their medication so that they can look at macro and perhaps look at that really significant disruption and disorganisation of your brain. Okay. I know there's a lot of people with burning questions.
There's a question in the back.
Just a quick question. If you wanted to find a coach or see a therapist, how do you go about finding one?
There are some websites. There is a... are you talking about the macrodosing or the microdosing? I think you head to the Hemp Embassy, hey Louise? If you're looking for a microdose coach. Look, I mean, I probably wouldn't recommend going to Mind Medicine's website. There is an American website, but they're mostly geared towards it's called Psychedelic Support. I did want to have some links here for you. I think ask around. The best thing is finding someone that usually has a really long waiting list. Because, there's a lot of people out there doing the work but not doing the work in its totality. And the one thing I've learnt, and I had access to some of the most amazing teachers and lecturers, and there was always this vein that ran through everything that we did was wellness and sharing. And unfortunately, there are some people out there that don't embrace that kind of ideology. But psychedelic support, it's an American website, but you can put in your postcode and it will tell you what therapists are available in your area.
Are there any social media groups talking about it? People sharing?
I think I have a Signal group, if you're interested. I can share that. I think the thing with social media is if people want to stay away from it because it is so, yeah, exactly. And I think, it's becoming a lot more mainstream and a lot more acceptable. But I think, in terms of I try to keep everything out of social media in this respect.
Yeah.
But you probably can't see this, but I just thought I was very clever. Oh no, I need my slide lady. Oh, you come back.
No. Yes, there it is.
Oh look, I got myself a barcode. So please, scan it, email me. I'm more than happy to share as much information. I think, have you got a question up there? Oh yeah, we'll get to you.
Hi, Lee.
Hi.
Thank you very much for your talk. You've spoken, you've mentioned several times about possible negative effects and risks in the therapeutic session. Can I ask, I gather worst case scenario in this setting is that someone would have what might, I guess you'd just call it a bad trip maybe. Anecdotally, we've all heard of people having bad trips, and you would do your best to screen individuals, history of psychosis, these sorts of things. But if you're touching on areas of childhood trauma, relationship failure, these sorts of things, it's inevitable that someone is going to have an unpleasant experience, and maybe not just for a short period of that therapy session, but the overall,
for 6 hours, yeah.
But the overall experience may be excruciating, and it possibly, because again, anecdotally, we've heard of people having bad trips, it might be one of the worst experiences of their life, potentially. Potentially, that's the risk. May I ask, have you had any experiences with individuals that have had those experiences? Anecdotally, have you heard of therapists having these experiences? And what sort of sense do you make of those? What do you do when that happens to a patient of yours? What protocols are in place?
That's a great question, a multi-layered question. Preparation. I had the pleasure of doing supervision with Dr. Bill Richards. If some of you know him, he's been doing the work for a long time, and that was exactly one of my questions to him. And the thing he said to me, if people are having bad experiences, it's because there wasn't enough preparation. Like, you really need, you can get a sense of, as a therapist, what's going on. If you're in tune, if you're an in-tune therapist, these sort of group settings where people just come in and there's no preparation, you really need to be looking beneath the veil, And the thing is, if they've had these traumas and it's embedded in their subconscious, even worse, it's embedded in their psyche, which happens a lot, right? People who experience trauma, oftentimes they don't even remember the trauma. So they're taking this psychoactive substance and the trauma's coming up, something that they've completely forgotten about. So preparation. integration, integration, integration. I've never had a situation where I could not handle, because your psyche is not going to reveal anything to you that you cannot handle. Curiosity, surrender, let go. But whatever is within you, and you will handle it. I mean, there's like a very odd, I think it's a 5% chance of reoccurring hallucinations where people, the medicine's worn off and they're still seeing hallucinations. So that's very, very rare. But in terms of bad trip, that's a great question. And that was what sort of Bill Richards said to me, preparation, preparation, preparation. Because oftentimes when people get to you, you know, they're desperate, they've tried everything else, you know, but you've got to unpack it. You really have to spend the time unpacking it and working, really being trauma-informed. Does that answer your question?
We've got another...
We've
got another question over here, and then I'm going to come over to that side next, okay guys? Last question on this side.
So based on what you just said, three semi-questions, you should not do a macro by yourself. That's my first question. The second one is, how often can you do a macro? Is it once in your life, once a year, that's safe? And then were you saying that it's more the macro dose as opposed to the micro dose that will create neural pathways?
Great question. Well, three questions. First question, no, do not take a macro dose by yourself. Have a trusted friend with you. Really think about the dose that you're going to take. I mean, I was lucky enough to hear Terence McKenna talk in Byron Bay in the 90s, and he talked about this, you know, he was taking these heroic doses, you know, 5-6 grams, and then he thought, I'm going to take 10 grams. And I remember him saying it was like walking through the gates of hell. And he unleashed it. You know, it's not necessarily the duration, but it's the intensity. You know, it's absolutely the intensity. Get someone that you know and love, have all the precautions in place, you know, set intentions, but no, never, never, never by yourself. What was the second question? Here's the thing. Oh yes, the macro is where the magic is. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, microdosing is fantastic if you remember to take it. But the disorganisation of mind and the state change comes from the macro dose. But it's also really important that neuroplasticity is still happening for, you know, up to 7 days after this experience. So you really want to be laying those and be aware and be laying those new tracks, you know, meditating, journaling, you know, being out in nature, finding ways to integrate that experience into your day-to-day life. A lot of time people have these experiences and they just park it on the shelf, you know, wow, that was pretty good. But being able to embody that experience and bring that experience into your day-to-day life is really where we're going to see that, that magic happen, and that shift in consciousness, not just within us, but within our communities. Is that how often can you do that? Here's the thing. Tripping is really good for your brain. I had a psychiatrist and a medical doctor tell me this. I think, you know, you want to give yourself space. You know, you don't want to be doing it every weekend. You want to be doing it intentionally, and you want to be doing it with purpose. But yeah, this whole kind of, you know, this, it's really funny. My 17-year-old daughter knows what I do, and she's horrified because she has been so, I mean, she lives in the house with me, but it's been so indoctrinated into her that you're going to lose your mind if you take magic mushrooms. You're going to go to a place and you're never going to come back. This is what is drummed into them by osmosis. Did that answer your question?
Right, now on this side of the hall, everybody, I'm going to come down. First question.
Thank you. I'm a bit late, so maybe you covered it, the two short questions. What do you think about accompanying somebody microdosing via Zoom, so having some support via cyberspace? And the second question was, Could you share anecdotal or from other people experience about treating fear of death and fear of dying?
Okay, so the first one, are you talking about doing a macro dose via Zoom?
No, microdosing.
Look, microdosing, you're not really eliciting any effect, really. You're just getting that, you're just exciting that that 5-HTA receptor. So it's you're not getting any of the psychedelic experience. So
medium dosing exists?
Medium dosing? What was the question? Sorry.
Yeah, medium dosing. So not micro, but not large amounts.
What's going to happen if you're not there physically and something goes bad? That's my, yeah. I mean, if they can have someone present with them in case something does go. I mean, I'm always safety, preparation. You know, the more you prepare and the more you integrate, the more you're going to get out of it therapeutically.
Right, next question.
Second question, dying and death.
Oh, sorry. What was the second?
Dying and death.
Oh, dying and death. Like I answered this question before, you know, there's this huge buzz around ego disillusionment, and you know that's what people come into it. You know, and so people have this preconceived idea. If people are scared of dying, and that's coming up in their dosing session, then they have to work through that. That's what's coming up. You know, and then that's when you look at the integration and you talk about, you know, what does that signify? You know, look at it with curiosity rather than something to be fearful of. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Now we have next gentleman here.
Hi, my name's Gerald. My question is a technical one. It's more, how do you test for strength? How do you test for the amount of psilocybin you've got in your mushroom?
That is a great question, and that is why they are using synthetic psilocybin in their clinical trials, because you can't. I mean, I don't know how to do it. That's way beyond my pay grade. But that's why they're not using the plant, because you might have 2 grams of dried psilocybin mushroom, but there's no way to know how much is in there.
Yeah, okay. So it's not possible to do it? It's not possible to measure it? Would that be right, or? Because clearly you're measuring it in the laboratory.
Because they're isolating it and synthesising it synthetically, so that they can gauge exactly how much is in that pill that they're giving.
Yeah.
But with, I mean, I don't. That's probably a question for a neuropharmacist, or I would not have any idea how you would measure.
Now we have, unfortunately, one more question. The lady that's got the second question will have to ask privately. Sorry.
Thanks. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a bit and explain a bit more about integration.
Okay, that is a really good question. So as a psychedelic assisted therapist, the way that we were trained was very much doing, not doing, and attunement. So not going into the narrative, but unpacking the experience more from an embodied aspect, rather than, oh, you know, I saw this 3-headed green monster, I think it was my mum. It was staying with the expansiveness of the experience rather than the experience itself. But of course, you know, people want to unpack it and they want to tell you every single little detail, but it's not.
Sorry, are you saying kind of don't really concentrate on the individual aspects of the trip rather than
100%. So what we're trying to do is stay with the experience, the feeling of the experience, rather than the mentalisation of the experience, because, you know, our mind wants to put meaning to everything, and some of those experiences, you know, you can't really put meaning to them, and it's going to mean something to each different individual. So you're just there really to support, and if they want to debrief and talk about their experience. But that's what we more focus on is what they call metacognition, so thinking about thinking. Us humans like to think and think and think until we make ourselves sick. So that's why this disorganisation of brain is so fantastic, because it gives us an opportunity not to think and not to go back to those ways of, oh my God, I did that, this is what that means, oh my God, I'm such a shit person, I feel like shit, the world's a shit place. So staying away from really going into the meaning. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I've taken psilocybin, earlier in my years as a bit of fun, but then therapeutically at a really quite high dose, probably about 30 grams.
Wow.
So I was going,
how'd you go?
About 3 or 4 days. About 3 or 4 days, and so my experience was like I had not random, but very individual experiences that were totally real, totally there, and quite easy to unpack individually.
Yeah.
But and everything that I had, all the problems that I had, and the intent was to remove them, became a pebble next to my foot.
And that's the...
But the integration, but then those issues have come back, so how do you integrate? So
we can't hear what the question is.
Do you want to come back to the microphone, or...? Share the mic.
Sorry, I was just talking about an experience where I took about 30 grams of psilocybin, and I was tripping for about 3 or 4 days. But the experiences were quite individual, and I just wanted to ask you if that was something that you could elaborate on more to elongate or prolong or actually solidify the benefits of those experiences.
And it was interesting, you said when he came out of the experience, all those problems were like a pebble. How long ago did you have your experience?
4 years ago.
I'd say do it again.
4 years ago, everybody.
Maybe not 30 grams, but, this is, that's the, often what they found in a lot of, with the trials is that it wanes. That's why this model that we were trained in, over the course of 6 months, you might do 3 sessions, 3 dosing sessions with psychotherapy in between each of those sessions. Yeah, they found that it's, there's a reason why Indigenous people have churches where they go and commune together and take psychedelics together as a community. And frequently to keep that idea that your problems are a pebble. Does that answer your question? Awesome.
Are you always talking dry, right? You're always talking dry?
Yeah.
30 grams dry? Always dry?
Please
I'm
share.
always talking dry weight, yes, because what is it? It's point, I think
10 to
it's...
1 maybe?
I think it's 7.
7 to
Yeah.
1.
So, 7 to 1. So, yeah, definitely dried.
There's a lot of people, a lot of fresh mushrooms are on the street here. A lot of people buying them. And I've missed a bit of talk, but yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty what to do. You've got to have a mate with you.
Definitely.
And yeah, I've had my bad moments tripping. What's your advice? You've got to keep breathing.
Oh, you've got to keep breathing, yes. I would say preparation. Intention, what am I doing here? Am I just doing it for the high, or am I doing it to actually gain something for my brain, for my consciousness? That's what I would say. Setting is a huge thing, You don't want to be taking it out on the street or,
Can I ask a bit more? Can you say a bit more about the death and dying Saskia asked about? Because for me personally, I was so happy to die. It was life-changing. Suddenly I understood what Jesus was on about. You've got to be born again. And we've got to remember that band, the Grateful Dead. This is a huge thing. Can you talk a bit more about that?
I think the Grateful Dead, but I think theirs was LSD, wasn't it?
LSD, but they were grateful.
Yeah, they were grateful.
They died. And waking up that you don't really die was pretty mind-blowing.
But a part of you is dying.
Yes.
So, you know, they talk about that ego disassociation. There's a part of you, I think, when you have these altered experiences and you are not separate like we are, you know, we're a very individualistic world and we see ourselves as separate from the world and separate from each other. And when we have these experiences and these altered states, that's what's dying, is our individuality. It's like we're all actually interconnected. Make sense?
Yeah.
I think we're running out of time. Is that right, Louise? We've got the menu ready to go. The kitchen's already. One last quick question. I'm sorry about the lady in the middle.
Hello, my name's Suzanne. You spoke earlier about macro dosing does change the format of your mind, it disorganises your brain. So my question is, obviously we've been conditioned all our lives. Is macro dosing a bit like defragging a computer?
I would say macro dosing is like dropping a drink on your computer. That is what I would say.
Consequently then it's permanent. So if you've had trauma, you microdose, you re-experience the trauma during your taking. Does it ever come back as trauma, or is it just
like we just talked about? There is a waning even with macro dosing.
Yeah. So it is like defragging a computer where
totally. It's like
the defragging.
Control, alternate, delete, 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 delete. It's
awesome.
It's that powerful.
Okay, I think
lunchtime. Thank you very much.
Louise wants to talk. Louise.
Thank you so much, Dee. And I'm sorry that you had to cut that a little bit short, because I'm sure everybody would have liked to hear more. So you have the opportunity at lunchtime to ask Dee any questions. Now, Jenny has cooked a most enormous, amazing banquet. And you just go and help yourself. It's $15 for as much as you want to eat. So please enjoy.